Village boy wiped the sweat from his face as he carried a heavy bundle of firewood through the dusty road. People at the busy market laughed when they saw his torn clothes and worn-out slippers. One man pointed at him and said, "Look at him. He will never become anything." The crowd laughed even louder. The boy lowered his head, smiled gently, and kept walking. As an old woman struggled to carry her basket, he quickly placed down his firewood and helped her without asking for anything. She thanked him with tears in her eyes. Just then, the sound of several cars filled the air. Dark SUVs rolled into the village square, and everyone rushed to see who had arrived. A powerful visitor stepped out and slowly looked around the crowd. Then the visitor's eyes stopped on the poor village boy. A surprised smile appeared, and everyone fell silent. No one knew why. The boy's name was Tunde. He lived with his sick grandmother in a small mud house at the edge of the village. Every morning before sunrise, he fetched water, gathered firewood, and worked on nearby farms to buy food and medicine for her. He had stopped going to school because there was no money, but he still borrowed old books and read them at night by the light of a small lantern. Everyone knew Tunde as the quiet boy who never fought, never complained, and always helped others, even when he had almost nothing. But many people believed poverty meant he had no future. They laughed at his dreams and said he would spend his whole life carrying firewood. Then, one terrible morning, his grandmother became too weak to stand, and Tunde realized he might lose the only family he had left. Section 1. From that day, Tunde worked even harder. Before the first rooster crowed, he walked to the stream to fetch water. After that, he searched the nearby forest for dry firewood. When the sun rose, he carried the heavy bundle to the market and hoped someone would buy it. Every coin he earned went towards food and medicine for his grandmother. He never bought new clothes for himself, even though the ones he wore were old and full of holes. His grandmother often told him to rest, but Tunde only smiled. "If I stop, who will take care of us?" he would ask softly. Some days, he went hungry so she could eat. Other days, he walked from farm to farm asking for small jobs. He cleared weeds, carried bags of grain, and repaired broken fences. No matter how tired he became, he thanked everyone who gave him work. Not everyone treated him with kindness. One afternoon, Tunde stood outside a shop, hoping to be hired. A rich trader looked at him and laughed. "You again? Go away. You smell like the forest." Several people nearby laughed with him. One young man tossed a small coin into the dust and said, "Pick it up like the poor boy you are." Tunde looked at the coin for a moment. Then he quietly turned away and continued walking. He would rather leave with nothing than lose his self-respect. An old woman, who had seen everything, called him over and gave him a loaf of bread. "Your good heart will take you farther than you know," she said. Tunde thanked her with a smile and hurried home. When he reached the small mud house, he found his grandmother lying on the floor, too weak to speak. He rushed her to the village clinic, carrying her on his back. After checking her, the nurse looked at Tunde with a sad face. "She needs treatment right away," she said. "Without it, she may not survive." Tunde searched every pocket, but he already knew the truth. He did not have enough money. The little he had could not even pay for the first medicine. As he stood outside the clinic with tears in his eyes, he realized he had reached a battle he could not win on his own. Tunde sat quietly outside the village clinic as the evening sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. He held his grandmother's hand through the open window and prayed that somehow things would change. He had never felt so helpless. The old woman he had helped at the market found him sitting there. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and gave him a small bag of food. "My son," she said softly, "kindness is like planting a seed. It may take time, but one day it will grow." Tunde lowered his head. "I have tried to do what is right, but my grandmother needs help now. I do not know where to turn." The woman nodded. "Tomorrow, an important guest is coming to our village. Many people will gather in the town square. They say this visitor wants to hear stories from ordinary people. Go there. Do not be afraid to speak." Tunde looked surprised. Why would someone important listen to a poor village boy like me? "Because a true leader listens to every voice," she replied with a warm smile. "You have nothing to lose by trying." That night, Tunde could hardly sleep. He worried that people would laugh at him again. He feared they would chase him away before he could even speak. But each time he looked at his grandmother resting on the clinic bed, he knew he had to try. Before sunrise, he borrowed the cleanest shirt he could find from a neighbor. It was too big for him, but he washed his face, combed his hair, and thanked the neighbor with a grateful smile. As he walked towards the village square, he saw people arriving from nearby villages. Some carried flags, Others sang songs of welcome. The same people who had once mocked him whispered as he passed, "Why is he here? He thinks someone important will notice him." Their laughter followed him, but Tunde kept walking. His heart beat faster with every step, yet he refused to turn back. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air. A line of shining black vehicles appeared on the dusty road, and the excited crowd rushed forward. The first car door opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped out. Behind him came several officials and security officers. The crowd clapped with excitement, hoping to be noticed. Tunde stayed at the back, not wanting to push anyone aside. As the visitors greeted the village leaders, an elderly man with grey hair slowly stepped forward. He was dressed simply, unlike the others, but everyone treated him with great respect. His eyes moved across the crowd until they stopped on Tunde. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled. "You are the young man who helped an old woman carry her basket without asking for payment," he said. The crowd became quiet. Tunde looked surprised. "Yes, sir. I only did what anyone should do." The old man nodded. "Not everyone would have done that." He turned to the village chief. "That woman is my elder sister. She told me everything. She said a poor village boy gave her kindness when many others walked past her." People looked at one another in shock. The same old woman stepped forward from the crowd and smiled warmly at Tunde. She held his hand and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "I wanted to see if the stories about this boy were true. He did not know who I was. He only saw an old woman who needed help." The rich trader, who had mocked Tunde, lowered his head. The young man, who had thrown the coin into the dust, could not even look at him. The elderly visitor continued, "Yesterday, I also heard from the clinic. The nurse told me about a young man who carried his sick grandmother on his back because he could not afford transport. She said he never complained, even when he had almost nothing." Many people remembered seeing Tunde carrying his grandmother through the village. What they had laughed at before now became a sign of love and courage. The visitor smiled again. "A person who serves others without expecting a reward is someone worth knowing." Just then, the village chief invited everyone to gather in front of the community hall for a special ceremony. Chairs were arranged, cameras were set up, and the crowd hurried closer, wondering what would happen next. Tunde stood quietly among them, unaware that his life was only moments away from changing forever. Tunde stood at the edge of the gathering, holding on to the last bit of hope he had, as the first car door slowly began to open. The village became silent, as the elderly visitor walked onto the small stage beside the village chief. Reporters lifted their cameras, and everyone waited to hear why such an important guest had come. The visitor looked across the crowd before speaking. "Today, I did not come here to meet the richest person in this village," he said. "I came to meet the person with the richest heart." People looked at one another, wondering who he meant. The visitor slowly raised his hand and pointed towards Tunde. "I want the young man standing at the back to come forward." A path opened through the crowd. Tunde froze for a moment, thinking there must be a mistake. The village chief smiled at him. "Do not be afraid, my son. Come." With shaking hands and slow steps, Tunde walked to the front. His old shirt and worn slippers stood out beside the smart clothes of the officials. Some people who had laughed at him only hours before now watched in complete silence. The visitor placed a gentle hand on Tunde's shoulder. "This young man has taught us a lesson that many educated people have forgotten," he said. "He gave his strength to help an old woman. He gave his money to care for his grandmother. He chose kindness when others gave him shame." The crowd listened without making a sound. The visitor continued, "Many people saw only his poverty. They never saw his courage. They saw his torn clothes, but they never saw his clean heart." The rich trader slowly stepped forward. His face was filled with regret. "I treated you badly," he said quietly. "Please forgive me." The young man, who had thrown the coin into the dust, also lowered his head. "We laughed at you because we judged you by what you owned. We were wrong." Tunde looked at them for a moment, then gave a gentle smile without saying a word. The visitor reached into his jacket and held up a document. "From today, Tunde's grandmother will receive the medical care she needs, and Tunde will return to school with a full scholarship. Every cost will be paid." A loud cheer rose from the crowd. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Others clapped with joy. The visitor lifted Tunde's hand high for everyone to see. "Never laugh at someone because they are poor," he said firmly. "A person's greatest wealth is the goodness they carry in their heart." The news spread across the village before the sun went down. The poor village boy whom everyone had laughed at was now the person everyone wanted to greet. People who had once ignored him smiled as he walked by, but Tunde remained the same kind and humble young man. His grandmother received the treatment she needed, and within a few weeks, she was strong enough to return home. Every day, she thanked God for giving her another chance to see her grandson's future become brighter. Soon, Tunde returned to school with his scholarship. He studied with all his heart, because he knew how much the opportunity meant. His teachers quickly saw that he was bright, hardworking, and eager to learn. The boy who once carried firewood before sunrise was now carrying books filled with hope. The rich trader, who had mocked him, changed his ways. He began helping poor families instead of looking down on them. The young man, who had thrown the coin into the dust, apologized again, and later became one of Tunde's closest friends. They learned that respect should never depend on a person's clothes or wealth. One afternoon, the village chief invited everyone to the town square. In front of the whole community, he presented Tunde with a special award for his kindness, courage, and good character. As the crowd clapped with joy, the same people who had once laughed at him now stood proudly on their feet. When Tunde was asked to speak, he looked at the faces before him and smiled. "I do not hate anyone," he said quietly. "If I carried anger in my heart, I would still be poor inside. Let us forgive one another and help those who are struggling. One act of kindness can change a life." His words touched many hearts. As the years passed, Tunde finished his education and returned to the village to build a small learning center where children from poor families could study for free. He also started a fund to help elderly people receive medical care, because he never forgot the day he almost lost his grandmother. Every morning, children filled the classrooms with laughter instead of fear. Parents smiled with hope, and older people knew they were no longer forgotten. Whenever visitors asked how the village had changed so much, the elders would point to Tunde and say, "It all began with one poor boy who chose kindness when the world gave him shame." And so, the village learned a lesson it would never forget: wealth may open doors, but a kind heart opens lives. Those who stay humble through hard times will one day stand tall, not because they sought revenge, but because they never stopped doing what was right. Tell us what you feel about the story on our comments section, and please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notifications button for more stories. Thank you.